Hey everybody, we're here at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook. Jason Chucky for the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends, powered by STN Sports. And we're going to dive into a little college football first. Georgia and Ole Miss, and one of us two is going to be at that game, and it's not me. So it's going to be fun. I mean, you think about these two teams, where they're at in the rankings right now, with Georgia, one of the top teams with the one loss, Ole Miss sitting on the outside looking in, but an opportunity maybe to knock off the Bulldogs here and get right back into that mix. They're a very small dog at home, as we kind of talked about, that whole area there, the Grove, the stadium, the fan base, it's going to be crazy. So what do you think about this game?
Obviously looking forward to going down to the game and seeing a big-time SEC football. And number 3, Georgia, the college football rankings come out yesterday. Georgia ranked number 3, obviously the loss at Alabama. Heading to Oxford, Mississippi, take on the Rebels. A huge win for Ole Miss last week at Arkansas. Finally saw Jackson Dart that we saw the first kind of 4 weeks of the season throwing the football around. He actually leads the nation in passing, 3,200 yards passing. He's got 21 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. He's the key to that.
Yeah, he's been great.
That Ole Miss offense, and I think that they have to throw the football. They get kind of this wanting to do the running game, but in order to go beat Georgia, I think they're going to have to sling the ball around. The bad thing for the Ole Miss offense in this game is there's a 70% chance of thunderstorms in Oxford on Saturday, so that could really eliminate the passing games from both these two teams, which might be a good thing on the Carson Beck Georgia side of things, because he's thrown 3 interceptions in each of the last 2 games, each of the last 2 wins. So if they've been able to win these games despite the fact that Carson Beck's been throwing these interceptions. And Georgia won this game in Athens last year, 52-17. Now, they don't have Ladd McConkey and they don't have Bowers, who we've seen both those guys have great success in the NFL here this year. So Georgia's missing a couple pieces of the puzzle, but a 52-17 beatdown is a real kind of flip to kind of where we're looking at this game right now, with Georgia being a 2.5 to 3-point favorite. I expected that line to be closer to just short of a touchdown, so I was a little bit surprised to see that it was only a field goal. But again, the games that Georgia has played, they haven't been that dominant, and that's because of the turnovers. But this is obviously a potential historic game for this Ole Miss club and Kiffin, and obviously Jackson Dart. To be able to beat Georgia in this environment would be absolutely incredible. But again, I think that number's a little bit too short. I think Georgia should be over that field goal favorite.
Well, like we kind of talked about too, I mean, a loss here would give Georgia a second loss, and it gives Ole Miss only 2 losses and a chance to maybe, move up there.
Yeah, they're 16th in the college football ranking. Obviously, they've got a couple of those teams ahead of them to get into that top 12. A win here over the number 3 team in the country clearly, I think, leapfrogs them into that top 12. We saw Penn State, who was the 4, lose to Ohio State last week, and they only dropped to the 6. So when you lose to a top team in the country, it didn't affect Penn State that too much. So being able to beat one of those top 3 teams in the country, it's got to absolutely leapfrog you. And I know that leads us into the other game that's going on in college football this week. I was excited to see. I wanted to see game day down in Oxford. I know that they ended up going to Alabama and LSU, but I know the SEC crew will be down there, so I'm looking forward to taking a picture of Tim Tebow down there.
Before we go on our next game, though, when you look at the score when these two schools played last year in Georgia, but the last 5 times they've played in Mississippi, with Ole Miss being the home team, all 5 games have gone under. So it's kind of a different atmosphere there. Here's a couple of interesting stats, too. Again, low point spread here. You're looking at Georgia in that 3 range. Jay thinks it might go up a little bit. Georgia 23-2 straight up in their last 25 games. But Ole Miss is 11-1 straight up in their last 12 games at home. So one of those 2 stats has to give this weekend.
Yeah, unfortunately, they had the bad loss this year at home to Kentucky, and then obviously go on the road and lose to LSU. Both of those games they were small favorites in. So to be the small dog here, a chance to shock the world.
So another game, great, same conference, Alabama and Lucy. Bama comes into this game a small favorite as well. Bama number 11 in the rankings right now. LSU with the 2 losses, sitting on the outside looking in. Big game for LSU as well. They're trying to beat Alabama and maybe get themselves back in the top 12.
Yeah, LSU 4-0 at home. Obviously, Bama 1-2 on the road. Both of the losses come in the state of Tennessee, with losses to Tennessee and one of the most shocking losses of the year, the loss at Vanderbilt. This game, the interesting thing for me here is the total at 58.5. We watch these 2 programs play just about every year. The last 5 years, they've only gone under this total that's posted at 58.5 one time. 70, 64, 34, 72, and 87. That's been the number of points scored in the last 5 years. So very good chance that this, again, is a shootout type game, watching both these quarterbacks kind of go up and down the field. And we haven't seen the dominant defenses. Obviously, we talk about Alabama's losses. But again, a monster chance for both of these two teams. Alabama sits the 11 in the college football playoff. LSU sits the 15. An LSU win here clearly makes the argument for them to go into the top 12. It's going to depend on what
both
SMU.
LSU and Ole Miss have opportunities to knock off Georgia and Bama, and it really creates kind of a havoc, I would say, for the committee at that point of who's going to move up and where.
This becomes a play-in game, essentially, because either of these two teams sitting with 3 losses, their college football playoff dream is out the window.
Right. A couple of interesting stats on this one, too. As Jay mentioned, with all the high scoring, the total's gone over 7 of the last 8 times Bama has played on the road. Bama is 6-1 straight up in their last 7 games when playing on the road at LSU. LSU is 15-1 straight up in their last 16 games at home. They're catching 3 here, and LSU is 6-1 straight up in their last 7 games overall. So definitely some trends here to look at as well. One more game we want to kind of touch on, and that's the UNLV against Hawaii game. UNLV, big road favorite here, come in at 13.5. We know that they want to play strong, win out, and maybe get another shot at Boise in the conference championship.
Yeah, I think that's all that they can do is do their part, win their games, try and win their games impressively, and put up those big numbers. They clearly have the talent. I mean,
Absolutely.
when we talk about what UNLV has become and what this football program it's become, it's exciting to watch. It's exciting to get to cheer for. And this is always one of those tough games, though, that you always wonder how the team responds to the long travel and going to play in Hawaii, and what you're going to get out of Hawaii. Hawaii has been kind of a really up and down team. They play some close games, then they get blown out. So this is an interesting spot here. But again, lean towards UNLV. That this is a really good spot. And again, this offense should be able to push the tempo and determine where they're at in this game.
You think about UNLV in the quarterback position. The quarterback who started last year, who left the program, he's going to be starting for USC next week. USC's on a bye. Then, of course, Luka actually, left the program to enter the transfer portal, and now you're on your 3rd quarterback there. I think it speaks volumes of the program that you can just go through a quarterback, and they haven't missed a beat with any of those guys. So I think the coaching staff has done a phenomenal job. Again, they want to kind of win out. They have a very favorable schedule to finish the season to get another shot at Boise. A couple of betting trends here. Vegas 5-0 straight up in their last 5 road games. They're 9-1 against the number in their last 10 games on the road. You guys have cashed with that. Hawaii 7-1 straight up in their last 8 games when playing at home against UNLV. UNLV looking to buck that trend. So just really quick, I want to run through the rankings again. So Oregon number 1 at 9-0, Ohio State number 2 7-1, Georgia number 3 7-1, Miami 9-0 at number 4. Then you have 5, 6, and 7. Texas, Penn State, and Tennessee all come in at 7-1. There was some talk about would Indiana be in or out. They're number 8 right now at 9-0. BYU, who plays at Utah this week, 8-0. Notre Dame 7-1. Bama 6-2, and then that team we just talked about, who UNLV would love another shot at, is 7-1, and that's Boise State.
Yeah, and I think you talked about Indiana. The interesting thing there, obviously sitting 9-0.
Right.
They've got the 3 games left. One of those games is Ohio State on their schedule. Obviously, a big game this week against Michigan. Although a win over Michigan, who's been kind of, we'll call it, depressed this season.
Right.
I don't know if it leapfrogs
not the same
them.
Michigan team, right?
But again, will they win out with a 1 loss to Ohio State? Should they lose that game? Is that enough for them to stay in this top 12 with that loss to Ohio State? And with what Penn State, lack of Penn State falling with their home loss to Ohio State, leads me to believe if Indiana can win out and not lose too bad, keep the game close with Ohio State, that they can find themselves staying in here. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that's also to be determined with these other teams knocking each other off, and everybody's got to go do what they've got to do. But again, very interesting from their standpoint. How do they stay in this playoff?
I think that's part of it is, though, when you look at Indiana so far, their kind of strength of schedule, and you've kind of heard them compared to a couple of years ago, TCU. Once they got up against the big boys, it was a different story. But I think that strength of schedule is the key, and you said it. If they don't lose too bad. If they get beat 52-10, I think it's a different story. If they're competitive in that game against Ohio State, I think they still stay in the top 12.
Yeah, and they're still, you talk about that laundry list of SEC teams. We talked about Tennessee, Texas, Alabama, LSU,
Right.
Ole Miss, there's still a lot of games to be played against each other. So those teams are going to kind of shake themselves out, and we'll see who survives. And one of the other things this week, obviously that number one team, Oregon, at home against Maryland this week, a big 25.5-point favorite. And I mentioned it last week, but when you guys do your handicapping these coming weeks, obviously we hit November and December, make sure to check those weather reports. 90% chance of rain up in Oregon this week
Big
for that
surprise. Yeah.
high-flying offense, and Dylan Gabriel, who's now that, the Heisman Trophy is Dylan Gabriel,
Right.
Cam Ward, Ashton Genty. It's
Genty,
kind of
right, yeah.
kind of a three-horse race, but I
Right.
think Dylan Gabriel and what Oregon's doing with that number one seed, that number one spot, and what he's doing on the offense, he's leapfrogged him to the kind of the guy to beat. But I think that from an Oregon standpoint, they want to keep putting the points up
Yep.
to give Dylan Gabriel that chance. And I also think you're looking at the same thing on that Miami side of the football. Miami wants to keep scoring, and Cam Ward wants to keep putting up those
Right.
stats. So two teams to really look at from a standpoint of can they cover and can they win their guy a Heisman Trophy. Oregon, Miami, I think they want to really flood the points up.
Yeah, I agree with you. Before we finish this segment of college football, last man standing, quick update. 12 contestants left in the college football last man standing. You guys have done phenomenal. There's been a lot of upsets this year. We've talked about it, but 12 of you guys left. I guess it could be the dirty dozen that are left in college football right now. So congratulations, good luck, great job, and we'll see how it all goes this week. We'll be right back on Bookends, and we'll dive into a little pro football heading into week 10.
Grandma, who you like today? I'm just walking into Durango. State? Grandma, I'm not betting them. No way they win. No, you don't know ball. Grandma, State's getting blown out. No, I will not live bet them. Grandma, there's no way they come back.
It's a big six. State pulls off a miracle comeback to win.
Grandma, you were right. I know. I should have bet them on STN Sports. Okay, I'll admit you know ball. I love you too, Grandma. Bye. Download the STN Sports app now.
Hey everybody, we're back at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook for the sports betting podcast Bookends, powered by STN Sports. And I'm going to talk a little pro football. Still been a kind of a crazy pro football season so far, but we had the trade deadline.
I'll be brutally honest. It's been
good for you
it's
guys.
Been an absolutely fantastic season for the bettors.
Right.
The books have had some tough goes these last 5 or 6 weeks.
Especially the primetime games. I remember last year the script was kind of flipped a little bit, that Sundays were kind of so-so, but there was a big streak in there, like 14 out of 15 games, where the primetime games went our way, where you had a lot more parity. This year that hasn't been the case. Although the Bucs did cover against the Chiefs, they had a chance to win that game outright. That's a whole nother story, but the over was there. But it's usually favored and over, or at least one of those two combinations that have gotten there for almost every primetime game.
Week 9, money line favorites go 14-1. So the Carolina Panthers upset of the New Orleans Saints was the only game that the underdog actually won the game outright. So the favorites,
if that's even an upset,
your money line favorites, your teasers, all been doing very, very well for the general public and the betting public. And the other thing that we continue to see is kind of these bad teams. I think we've got 8 teams that have 2 wins in the National Football League, and they're still kind of competitive numbers. You talk about the New Orleans Saints, who obviously just fired their coach this week. They're only a 3 to 3.5 point dog against the Falcons. You see a Jacksonville Jaguar team.
Right.
Now, obviously, there's some news breaking this
Right.
morning that Trevor Lawrence is questionable, so that line has gone up. But they were only a 4-point underdog to the Minnesota Vikings.
Right.
We've got a 4-point underdog in the Colts to the Buffalo Bills, and these are the home teams. And then the one that in the evening hour Sunday night, the Texans
We'll
only
touch
a
on
3
that,
to
right.
3.5 point dog to the Lions. So you have these big favored teams against kind of some teams that haven't been playing well, and they're very, very short favorites. And the betting public's been taking advantage of those because we haven't been able to get those big kind of upsets.
Right.
Not even call it big upsets, the small ups, just the underdog able to win the game. We haven't been able to get those. You guys have been able to cash a lot of tickets.
The interesting part about that, though, in many cases, it's kind of the Joes versus pros, where you see some sophisticated money roll in like we did last week on the Packers against the Lions, but the public, you guys were all over the Lions in that game, where you had almost an 80% clip of the tickets was actually on the Lions in that game.
Well,
yet we saw a lot of sharper, sophisticated money come in on the Packers, which just didn't get there.
And you talked about it. There were 4 opportunities for teams to go for
Right,
the 2-point conversion instead of tying the game up, and all 4 teams that elected to kick an extra point to tie the game ended up losing.
They all lost,
They all
right,
lost that game
right.
instead of and the Tampa Bay Bucks was probably culmination of it all
Right.
as a 9-point underdog going into Kansas City. You got one play, and you can knock off the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead, and you elect to kick the extra
and you're
point.
without Godwin and Evans. I think you ask anybody in that locker room, if you had a chance, as you and I kind of talked about, to go into Kansas City and one play to win from the 2-yard line, I think every guy would have signed up for that, because you're a 9-point underdog. You're almost a double-digit underdog, and you choose to kick. And I really didn't like when you listen to Todd Bowles when he actually said, we gave very little thought to doing that. Well, I texted you, and we were texting back and forth that night, and I said, what did I say? Tampa will never see the ball again. You know who's undefeated, was the best record in overtime as a quarterback in the NFL? Patty Mahomes.
Yeah,
I
so
mean, you have
game,
to think they knew that.
You had the Dolphins, who've had, and obviously somewhat of a lost season with Tua being down for so many games.
But you have a chance to win in Buffalo.
Right, have a chance to go upset, and instead of kicking the extra point, to go for 2, and then, of course, the 61-yard field goal for the Bills to win it. But, there's these games are fun.
The Patriots, too. I mean, it's a lost season. You've got a very young team. You scored on the last play of the game. Drake May made a great throw the last play of the game. We thought he had thrown it away, and then you elect to kick. I mean, coaches, don't be afraid to win. Some of these teams, I think you've got all the momentum at that point, and they kick and they end up losing more times than not.
Well, I think there's a race for the playoffs.
But they're not in it.
I know. And then there's a race for the number 1 pick, as we have all these teams with two wins, and I don't know that they're trying all that hard to continue to win games. So, and when we see this type of separation, it gets scary, because you have certain teams that want to win and certain teams that, again, the trade deadline, the teams that are looking to lose and looking to trade their players away to not affect those salary caps and pay those money.
Those were the two biggest ones, though. I guess I can understand the Patriot one a little bit. I think when you look at the Seahawk-Ram game, Seahawks were at home in that game, figured that they might get an opportunity, and they got down there. Just 2 really bad play calls on 3rd and 4th. But to me, again, you have a chance to knock off the Chiefs in Kansas City. You're a big underdog, and you don't do it. And the other one really was a head-scratcher, was that Miami game. You only have 2 wins. Tua has missed a number of games this year. He's back. I think everything changes. If you win that game, everything changes. And they were able to move the ball on Buffalo. They were able to run up and down the field with Mostert and a chain really well. I think he had Waddle, who's finally scored a touchdown. So your offense was kind of coming back. You had a lot of momentum in that game. I was just stunned that he chose not to kick, or to kick in that game and not go for 2. But anyway, another thing this week was the trade deadline, and 2 trades really just jumped off the page to me. One was the Lions going out and getting Zadarius Smith from the Browns, getting that pass rusher to replace Hutchinson. And then the Commanders. I mean, you think about the Commanders, 7-2, and the back end. When you look at teams that are giving up yards per pass play, the worst 4 teams are all 2-7. The 5th worst team is the Commanders. They're 7-2, but they went out and got Lattimore from the Saints, which really, I think, helps that back end a lot. And I think the move of Zadarius Smith really sends a message by Detroit to the rest of the NFL. Hey, we just went into Green Bay. We went into one of the toughest places to win. We won outdoors, and we're here to win it. And we went up and got a pass rusher to help in case Hutchinson's not back for the postseason. I thought 2 really good moves by those 2 teams.
Yeah, and you said it perfectly. I mean, those were key needs for both of those 2 teams. Obviously, Washington has struggles, have been in the back end. This is helpful and secures that there. And obviously, the Lions hadn't had a sack from a DN since Hutchin's gone out. So this is a great pickup for a team that, again, has that trajectory and looks that they could be playing on a big Sunday in February.
Yeah, I thought they really helped themselves. We saw on Monday night, Hopkins, the move the Chiefs made, really helped that offense a lot. So some of these coaches who are really good coaches understand what the importance is to go out and get that one player. Last year, the Bears did it with Montez Sweat. They had a defense on the backside of the top 15. They ended up finishing top 5. So you can identify that one key player that helps a lot, and in many cases, it can transform your franchise. Okay, we're going to dive into this week right now. Thursday night football, a rematch of a game a few weeks ago. Bengals, Ravens. This is a huge game for both teams. Ravens 6-3, Bengals 4-5. But a Bengal win here, and they let one get away in Cincinnati. Another kind of bad move in overtime there. They ran the ball, I think, 4 times from around the 35, the 40-yard line. Tried a long field goal, missed. Ravens ended up winning this game in overtime as well. But a big game for both these 2 teams. But the last 5 times these teams have played, all 5 games have went sailing over. And this is some of the biggest games that Joe Burrow has had in his career. I think he has over a 450 game and a 500-yard passing game against this Raven defense. So he's clearly kind of figured that defense out.
Yeah, it's a shootout special for sure on Thursday night. And when we're all expecting that, maybe that's when you get the dud and these defenses stand up. But the Ravens have been really unpredictable, a team that has had some bad losses in their stuff and then obviously blowout wins. Picking up key pieces of the puzzle as well. They're making some moves. This was a 41-38 overtime victory for the Ravens on October 6th.
Just a few weeks ago, yeah.
In a game that the Bengals led, you talked about it, 31-21 early in the fourth quarter, and then just watch this leak away. So again, they know they have the confidence. They know they have the ability to play with this Raven team. You're potentially getting 6 points here. Burrow and the team looked good last week in their win over the Ravens. Some big plays to Mike Gesicki, the tight end. But historically, the big games here come from Chase and Higgins. And I think in this first matchup, Chase had 2 touchdowns. Higgins had 2 touchdowns.
Higgins may not be back, though, in this one.
So he's going to have to find a way to find those wide receivers because that's the holes that the Ravens offer.
Yeah, it would be key to get Higgins back here. As I mentioned, 5 straight times these two teams have gone over. Cincinnati this year, 4-1 against the number, their last 5 games on the road. And Baltimore is 5-0 against the number in their last 5 games when playing Cincinnati. So this is a big game for both teams because both teams happen to trail. One of the teams we're going to talk about soon, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are 6-2. But before we do that, there's a game in Germany early Sunday morning, so get up early. Our books will be open, kiosks will be open, SDN Sports will be open. Now, it's a great game. It's the 2-7 New York Giants and the 2-7 Carolina Panthers. I'm sure everybody in Germany is excited about what? What's so funny?
Both teams that could...
They're 4-14 combined.
Both teams that could desperately use a number 1 pick and probably use a new quarterback to be
the Giants or the Panthers had a number 1 pick a few years ago, and it hasn't worked out. But
use another one.
Yeah,
but we definitely an interesting game in Germany. And again, I think that if the NFL is sending you overseas, the likelihood that you're not in a playoff race is probably pretty high.
Let's see here. The total has gone under in 7 of the last Giants' last 10 games. So it shows you that offense is not a premium. Interesting to see kind of Bryce Young again as he tries to get that job back. They traded Deontay Johnson. There were some rumblings that they could trade Chuba Hubbard or Thielen, which they didn't do. I think, this is kind of an audition for Bryce Young the rest of the year to see how he does as well. Yeah, and they're about a 6-point underdog.
We'll see if Jonathan Brooks plays in this game, a young running back for Carolina can come back. And as much as we joke about how bad these two teams are, they're both fighting. At least Carolina showed some gumption last week, knocked off the Saints. The Giants had 2 different opportunities to against the Redskins or the Commanders last week to be in that game, to potentially go down and win that game. And had some turnovers, had some really bad penalty calls with a touchdown being taken away. So at least these 2 teams are fighting and playing hard. And again, you still see the Giants as a pretty hefty favorite, kind of telling you what that Carolina team is from a power rating standpoint and how depleted they are.
Well, they were over a touchdown underdog last week at home to the Saints. Were able to win that game outright. So maybe it's a young Panther team that is playing hard for Dave Canellis, and a lot of these guys kind of auditioning for their jobs next year. Another game, Niners coming off their bye, at Tampa. Hard for Tampa to probably get back up again after that game. There's a chance that you see Christian McCaffrey back here. I think the bye couldn't have come at a better time for the 49ers. They're getting a little bit healthier right now, and they're playing at Tampa in this one where they're about a 5.5, 6-point favorite.
Yeah, just short of that touchdown favorite. And the interesting thing here is obviously you have Tampa in a short week after playing on Monday night, having to face the Niners who come off their bye week. Right. So no favors done to the Buccaneers in this situation from the schedule standpoint, and obviously the depleted receiver core. But again, we did see this team fight. We do see the gunslinger in Baker Mayfield and the running backs in the backfield.
Defensively, they're good. It's just
Cade Otton is a budding star at the tight end position. But again, this is a big ask to face this Niner team, who we've seen just about every year. I've talked about it, how I expected this Niner team to limp out of the box and not have a good start to the season with all the offseason stuff. Again, that wasn't with any knowledge of Christian McCaffrey not playing the first 9 weeks of the season. But now this is the time when the Niners usually make their run and they go on a 5, 6, 7-game winning streak to put themselves at the top of the NFC conference as we head into the playoffs. So no surprise here if McCaffrey finds himself back on the field that we see the best
and Mason as well.
We see the best Brock Purdy we've ever seen, and we see Samuel, and we see these receivers, and we see Kittle start to have big games. And that Tampa defense, despite the fact that they stood up and played well, they've had some games where they can be a little bit leaky and give up some big plays, and Mayfield comes back. But again, I think that's why you see this spot with a surprise of how big the favorite the Niners are with what we've seen out of Tampa.
I think to your point, though, the Niners have to be good because they very quietly let the Rams and the Cardinals back in. Both teams were kind of off to miserable starts. The Cardinals were 2-4. They're now 5-4. The Rams were 1-4. They're now 4-4. So both teams very quietly have kind of snuck back into it a little bit. Seattle still has played well this year. They're around the 500 rank as well. They're going to get DK Metcalf back. So I think this Niner team, you're right, they're kind of a sleeping giant a bit. They're getting a little bit healthier, but they've let teams back in their division now who've had some success against them this year. Both the Rams and the 49ers have beaten them.
Yeah, and they were always the class of the NFC, or favored to win that NFC, and I think they've now fallen behind both Detroit and Philadelphia from that standpoint in their NFC projections.
Right. So another game now in the NFC, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles, who seem to be getting healthy and hot at the same time against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, before the season started, if we had talked about what would the spread be in this game, never in a million years would we have thought it'd be over a touchdown. But no Dak Prescott, no Micah Parsons. We know CeeDee Lamb is banged up. Cowboys can't run the ball. I think they have a lot of internal problems. What in God's name has happened to them? They're one of the teams that we really thought was going to be a Super Bowl team. They're just a disaster right now. You have to wonder if McCarthy survives or not the entire season. Eagles, again, starting to play better right now with A.J. Brown and Smith healthy. Saquon Barkley, unbelievable play. One of the best plays we saw, that kind of spin and jump last week. So in spite of Nick Sirianni going for 2-3 times and not getting it, this Eagle team is starting to right the ship a little bit.
Yeah, and they let the Jaguars kind of leak back into that game last week.
The turnover kind of changed
the key
everything.
Fumble by Barkley lets them back in. You talked about some of the questionable going for two over and over again, the questionable fourth down decisions with a big lead. But yeah, that play by Saquon Barkley, that what's going to be the new? I don't play video games, but I can tell you that the new Madden will have Saquon Barkley as the only player that does the backwards jump over the player. Right. Absolutely incredible reaction on the sidelines from his own teammates watching that play. Something special. But again, this Eagle team, despite the fact that they've been winning, it still feels like it's a winning ugly kind of situation. You talk about A.J. Brown being healthy. A.J. Brown's still fighting a health bug.
If you go back 2 years, though, and then the first half of last year, that offense seemed like the best offense in football. They just seem like there's something missing there.
The push-tush isn't unstoppable the way it was just last year. We saw the Jaguars able to stop that
Three
play
times,
to where the Eagles are starting to get, faking the push-tush and some other kind of plays off of the push-tush formation. But again, this is an interesting spot just because of where Dallas is sitting with the lack of players, lack of playmakers. Does this team have the fight in them to have a divisional opponent come into town and find some fight? The worst thing is, but their defense just isn't there.
Right.
The teams are running the football. I saw the Falcons last week. Just really run right through them, and with this Eagle team coming into town and Saquon Barkley, you question, does Dallas have the gumption to stand up, let alone at home? They've been really bad. I think they've had 4 games this year so far where they've been down 15 points or more at least, halftime.
I think it was closer to 20.
So again, a big spot for the Eagles to continue their winning ways.
Yeah, and Dallas is so banged up. It's not just Micah Parsons. It's the defensive line. It's that linebacker, the back end. And now you're losing Dak. You're really going to hope that Cooper Rush can step in, play a good game. But the key is you have to hope that CeeDee Lamb is there, because without him and without Cooks right now, you make the trade with Carolina for Jonathan Mingo, you really don't have a lot of weapons on offense right now. I'm really still surprised that they didn't make a deal for a running back. If it was Herbert who ended up going to Cincinnati, or you could have gone out there and got another back, Travis Etienne from the Jags, I thought Dallas should have made that move, and they didn't.
I like Rico Dowdle. I think he's absolutely a star in the making. Again, this offense has struggled so much, it's not given anybody a chance to really put up some big numbers. They're trying the Dalvin Cook plug in there, which didn't work. Ezekiel Elliott hasn't been that good, but Dowdle, when he's had the touches, both running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield, has been what I would say solid for them. But clearly, he's not a guy that is meant to carry the offense for 3 downs and 25 times a game. Yeah.
The next game is what I think is one of the best games of the weekend, if not the best game of the weekend. It's two teams that are in first place, both surprising. I don't think anybody thought the Steelers would be in first place. I don't think anybody thought the Commanders would be in first place. We talked about the Commanders making the deal for Lattimore. I thought the Steelers helped themselves too. They needed a wide receiver. They needed a complementary piece to go with that running game, to go with Pickens and Freiermuth. They went out and got Mike Williams. I know he's been injured a lot. He underperformed with the Jets. But when you go back a few years with the Chargers, he had some big playability. He's a big receiver. He can stretch the field. He can get open. I think it helps this offensive lot. We know how talented they are defensively, but I think it's a big piece that really helps the Steelers. This game opened the Commanders 2. It's climbed up to 3. We've seen a lot of sharp, sophisticated money one-sided in favor of the Commanders here. We both think the Steelers are kind of live just because they play defense, but this is a battle of two surprising teams that are both in first place in their divisions.
Yeah, and obviously the Steelers coming off the bye week, so some extra time to prepare, extra time to get healthy. But the story of this Commanders season is Jaden Daniels. I mean, this kid's incredible. It's absolutely unbelievable to watch him. The playmaking, the running ability to scramble and extend plays, finding McLaren downfield. They were able to win last week without Robinson Jr., the running back. Plug and play kind of Eckler and some other guys in there, and they're really just a feel good story. And I don't know what the trades do this week of how much Williams and they affect the games this week. The big thing for me here is the Washington Commanders' problem area has been the back end defense, the covering the wide receivers, which isn't something the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be known to exploit. They are a running team. They want to run the football. And Harris and Jalen Warren's been getting healthier kind of as the season gets on. But that's a really two-headed monster that the Steelers can run the football, keep Jaden Daniels off the field, control the football, and make this a low-scoring, grinded-out type of game. That's what they want to do. But that defensive front for the Commanders is actually pretty good.
Really good,
They can get after the quarterback, and they can stop the run. They haven't been able to stop the pass. So this could be a can't run the football, put it on Russell Wilson's shoulders, and he's going to have to find Pickens and Freiermuth and some of these other guys in the backfield to kind of exploit that back end. And this is a big T.J. Watt game. He's got to get to Daniels a couple times. The Steelers have to force a turnover or two for them to stay in that game because this young man, he's a special player.
Right, and the Steelers have to know, I mean, on Thursday night that either the Bengals or the Ravens, one of those two teams is going to lose, and they have a chance here. I think that the Commanders, though, Dan Quinn has done a phenomenal job. Everybody talks about Dan Campbell and the job that he's done with Detroit, which he has, but I think Quinn's kind of the same type of coach. I mean, he's got the baseball cap on backwards on the sideline. You see that his team kind of embodies his emotion and the way he plays. I think both those guys have done a phenomenal job this year. I think for me right now, Quinn is the coach of the year. I mean, the expectation level there from being in last place to taking this, having the second pick in the draft as the second worst team, to take this Commander team and make them 7-2 right now, really impressive for the job that he's done. And again, that number's kind of climbed up from 2 to 3. We'll see where it settles, but for me, this might be the game of the day.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody in the NFC is going to looking forward to as the Commanders keep winning games, or if they keep winning games and find themselves in the playoffs. I think they're a very, very scary team matching up against anybody just because what Daniels can do with his legs.
All right, Sunday Night Football now, and you alluded to it earlier. Kind of the same situation we saw last week with the Lions. Lions were 3.5 point underdogs to kind of open up against Green Bay. It was their first, I think, outdoor game of the year. They still have a game in Chicago and maybe one other game. We know that the splits for Jared Goff are so different, but being in the dome and being outside, the game came down to 2.5. Again, very Joe's versus pros game. But you guys were right. I mean, they were dominant in that game. You look at Campbell after the game. He's like, hey, we don't care. We'll play outside, inside, anywhere. You name it. Our team will play. They played phenomenal in that game. For me, they are the best team in football right now. If they were to play the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, I'd still kind of think maybe they're a small underdog just because it's Kansas City and two-time defending champs. But for me, nobody is playing better than the Detroit Lions right now. And they're a small road favorite against kind of a beat-up Texan team. Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs. they got to find a way to move the football, because over the last couple of weeks, C.J. Stroud hasn't looked like the same guy that he was last year with those weapons.
Yeah, I'll go back just on the Detroit and the Packers game. Obviously, Jordan Love came into that matchup, with the groin and maybe wasn't 100%. He commits the key turnover at halftime. Was going to be a 7-point game going into halftime. That got stretched out to a 14-point game, which, again, you let that Lions team get the lead, and now it's Montgomery and Gibbs ground and pound. But they're doing it in all phases, defense, offense, special teams. The Lions look absolutely fantastic. And we're going to be big Texans fans this week.
We will be.
Obviously, the Texans last Thursday, so some extra time going into this Sunday night matchup that they've got to rest to get these guys healthy, and we do expect Nico Collins to play in this game. But they're coming off a loss to the Jets in a game that they really got kind of dominated, and maybe one of the bigger injuries outside of Nico Collins was Will Anderson Jr., also banged up in that game, went in and out of that game, and he's the key to everything that they want to try and do.
Their offensive line was brutal. They could not protect C.J. Stroud, and now you're going up against a Detroit team that's physical and mean and gets after it.
You just wonder how long can Detroit keep this run going. They've had so many great games in a row, from destroying the Cowboys, beating the Pack. I mean, they just look dominant over and over and over again, and you just wonder, when do they throw in that clunker? And that's all we're praying for from a book, is that they throw in a clunker here.
I don't know
because
if they do.
The betting public has been feasting on the Detroit Lions and betting them each and every game, cashing those tickets with ease. And we're going to be big fans of the Texans. I said this was a very short number for them to only be 3.5. I thought it was going to be closer to 4.5 or 5 that the Lions would be favored.
It might be by kickoff.
Maybe that Nico Collins coming back gives the Houston Texans the spark that they need to be playing in their home stadium. And again, they've got the Colts kind of chasing them. It was a big loss by the Colts this past week at Minnesota. And obviously the Colts play Buffalo at home this week. So the Texans are still trying to find a way to secure that lead there. But again, a loss here might not be that devastating to them if the Colts continue to lose. But man, we're going to need a big effort out of, you talk about it, Stroud, Collins, Dell, Mixon. They've got the guys on offense that you could think could compete in this game.
Yep.
But man, the Lions just in all phases. And Goff, he doesn't turn the ball over. He's efficient. I think there was a stat, I think I was telling you, he's had 4 straight games where he's started the game with 10 or more completions with 10 attempts. So he's perfect in his first 10 attempts in the game. And when you get behind this Lions team with those 2 running backs and that offensive line, they're a tough team to come back on.
Yeah, I think you look at this Texan team, and we've talked about their offensive struggles. 7 of their last 8 games have gone under. So with the injury to Nico Collins, and I know he's supposed to be back, and no Stephon Diggs, and Joe Mixon was out for a while, that offense just hasn't been clicking on all cylinders, and Stroud's been under duress. I mean, that offensive line has not been able to protect him, and that's why I think we've seen so many of these games go under so far. Monday Night Football, we talked about it earlier. The Dolphins, who come off that heartbreaking OT loss to the Bills, travel across country to play the Rams, who've won 3 games in a row. Rams are right back in it. There was rumblings a month ago they would be trading some guys. They didn't trade really any of their key components right now. They were a 2.5 point favorite. We've seen this number start to come down now. Not sure why this game has dropped a point and a half, but it is a big game to both these two teams. Rams want to stay in it in the NFC West. Of course, the Dolphins, every game means something now. They come in with only 2 wins. They are chasing the Bills, chasing the Jets a bit. They need some wins traveling across country here in a tough task against Sean McVay and that Ram defense.
Yeah, and I was surprised at this number as well. Obviously, the Dolphins are continuing to show fight. They get Tua back. We know that the weapons that they have in Hill and Waddle and A-Chain and Mostert, bad turnover by Mostert in that game that really let the Bills kind of take that lead. But they fought themselves back, and that's all you can ask. And good to see from a team that has a record that they have. And now traveling on Monday night, again, a chance to show your skills on a Monday night. And when we see Tyreek Hill, who's had a very under Tyreek Hill type season. I know any fantasy guys that have him have to be, yelling into their stuff of what a poor season he's had and probably a poor record that team has for that draft pick. But again, he's still a weapon, and I think that this is where they've now had the 2 weeks of Tua, go play indoors where we could see them throw the football around a little bit more here. And obviously the Rams if they can keep Puka on the field and he's not throwing punches and getting kicked out, but that Puka Nakua Cooper Kupp combination is always really, really dangerous to go along with Matt Stafford and Kyron Williams out of the backfield. So this could be I think this could be a high scoring game where we watch these kind of superstar receivers put on a show on Monday night.
Rams a very small favorite, as we said. The numbers kind of come down a little bit. They are 7-1 straight up in their last 8 home games.
You know, couple of the games that we didn't talk about is the Bills at Colts. Made mention of that game, Bills at Colts, and then you have Broncos playing the Chiefs. And the only reason I mentioned those 2 games is because if you're a look ahead type person, the Bills play the Chiefs next week. So
and the Broncos beat the Chiefs in one of the 2 games last year.
If you're looking to bet a dog, looking to bet a couple dogs, maybe Indianapolis at home, Joe Flacco. We did see some kind of chinks in the armor in the Bills secondary last week that maybe Flacco can exploit, have a big game with Downs or Pierce or Pittman. I think the Colts could be live in that game
You're
against
trying to
Buffalo.
entice people to bet some dogs.
No, I'm just saying, the look-ahead spot.
Right, yeah.
Buffalo, Kansas City, this is a situation that you look at all the time, and you'll go back after this Sunday and go, oh, of course, this was a spot where they weren't going to come because they're playing, this team next week.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's also kind of a look-ahead spot for the Eagles and Commanders. I think they might play on Thursday Night Football the following week. So you think about that, too, how the complexion of that division could be changed a bit. Maybe a few teams have some look-aheads, as Jay mentioned. Real quick with last man standing in the pros, again, a huge drop. There's 14 contestants left in last man standing for pro football. So, again, the 12 in college, the 14 in pro. Tremendous job, you guys. College season is winding down. Still have a few more weeks there. The pros, we're just about at the halfway mark as we go into week 10, but a lot of football left in both those.
Yeah, and you talk about the college football season winding down, and now we've got the college basketball season, starting off. And so this time of year, as we hit November, it's absolutely incredible with the number of sports we have going on between NBA, NHL, college football, pro football, and now college basketball starting up. If you don't have the app, get on the app. We still have the $50 no-worry wager bonus for all new signups, up to $50 no-worry wager for all new signups. Get on the app, check everything that we have going on, and there's a lot more between UFC. We're about a week away from Tyson and Jake Paul, which we're going to have on in all of our big racing sports books. So that Friday, November 15th, make your plans to join us and watch Jake Paul, Mike Tyson on our big screens.
A lot of good stuff going on. The Knights really good at home, not so good on the road. We'll see how those home and road splits go the rest of the way. But for Jason, I'm Chucky for the Sports Betting Podcast, Bookends, powered by STN Sports. Good luck this week, and we'll see you guys next week.